Mum, we're not asking you. We're telling you. It's for your own good. My son, Mark, said those words right here in my own living room. The afternoon sun was coming through the blinds, making little stripes of dust dance in the air. I could smell the lemon polish I'd used on the coffee table that morning. I was sitting in my favourite armchair, the one with the worn velvet that my late husband George always said fit me like a glove. The doctor's folder about my hip surgery felt heavy on my lap. My daughter, Susan, was perched on the edge of the sofa, looking at her own hands. She wouldn't meet my eyes. A cold feeling spread through my chest, colder than any winter wind. It wasn't about the surgery. It was about those words. We're not asking you. In that moment, I wasn't their mother anymore. I was a problem to be managed, a line item on a budget sheet. The rest of my life, I realized, was what they were discussing, and I was not going to have a vote. Mark pulled a sheaf of papers from his briefcase and spread them on the coffee table. The sound was crisp and loud in the quiet room. "Okay, so here's the plan," he said, all business. "After the surgery, you'll need around-the-clock care for a few weeks. We found a place. It's called Golden Meadows." Golden Meadows. It sounded like a sad cemetery. I imagined grey walls and the smell of boiled cabbage. "It's very affordable," Mark continued, tapping a finger on a brochure. "And it means we won't have to dip into the main savings. That money needs to be preserved for the long term." My money. From the sale of our family home after George passed. He meant their inheritance. I glanced at Susan. She was picking at a loose thread on her sleeve, just nodding along. A slow, hot anger started to bubble up under my fear. It felt hard and solid, like a stone forming right in my gut. They had it all figured out, didn't they? That night, I couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet. The only sound was the hum of the old refrigerator. I sat in George's leather recliner, running my hand over the cracked armrest. "Dignity, Ellie," he'd always said. "Whatever happens, we give each other dignity." They were taking mine and selling it for a discount. I picked up my tablet from the side table. The screen felt cool and smooth under my fingertips. I opened my banking app. The numbers glowed in the dark room. It was a healthy amount, more than enough for the best care money could buy. George and I had been careful our whole lives. We saved for this, for a comfortable old age, not for a bigger inheritance. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Mark's wife, Brenda. "Hi, Eleanor. Hope you're doing okay. Just a random thought. Have you had a chance to update your will recently? Mark was just saying we should all make sure our paperwork is in order. Let me know." I turned off the phone. A random thought. Of course it was. I took a taxi to my pre-op appointment the next day. I told Mark I wanted to go alone. To think. He seemed relieved. Walking into the clinic with my cane, feeling the ache in my hip with every step, made me feel so fragile. I was 72 years old and about to have major surgery. I had never felt more vulnerable. In the waiting room, the air smelled of rubbing alcohol and old magazines. I sat down on a squeaky vinyl chair. Two women next to me were talking in low voices. "My son means well," one of them said with a sigh. "He took over my bills, but now I feel like I have to ask for permission to buy a new pair of shoes." The other woman nodded. "They think they're helping, but they're just taking." I looked down at my own worn-out loafers. I hadn't bought new shoes in a year. A small, stubborn thought took root in my mind. It was a tiny seed of an idea, but it felt like the first sprout of spring after a long, cold winter. The day of the surgery, they all showed up at the hospital. Their concern felt thin, like a cheap blanket that gives no warmth. They fussed over my pillows and complained about the hospital parking. Just before they wheeled me away, Mark leaned in close. The smell of his coffee was strong. "Mum, while you're in recovery, I'll need your online banking password, just to pay your electric bill and things. It'll be easier." "It's for your own good," his tone implied. Something inside me clicked into place. That little seed of an idea from the waiting room suddenly had a stem and leaves. I looked him right in the eye. "Oh, you don't need to worry about that, dear," I said, my voice smooth as silk. "My financial advisor, Mr. Henderson, handles all of that digitally. It's all automated." I didn't have a financial advisor named Mr. Henderson. I paid my own bills, always on time. The lie came so easily. The look of surprise on Mark's face was a small, satisfying victory. It was just a little thing, but it felt like I'd lit a match in a very dark room. I woke up slowly. The world came back in pieces. First, the low, steady hum of the air conditioner. Then, the scratchy feel of the hospital blanket against my chin. A dull, throbbing ache started in my hip and spread through my whole body. My mouth felt like it was full of cotton. I blinked, and the blurry white ceiling swam into focus. Sitting on my bedside table was a thin, tri-fold brochure. The paper was cheap. The colours were faded, a sad sort of green and beige. On the front, a picture of a long, low brick building with very few windows. The name read, Golden Meadows Care Facility. Susan must have left it. A wave of cold despair washed over me, so heavy I could barely breathe. They hadn't even waited for me to be fully conscious to show me my future prison. The despair didn't last, though. It burned away, leaving something hard and sharp in its place. A young nurse with a kind face came in to check my vitals. She had a gentle touch. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Vance?" she asked, her voice soft. I saw the tear tracks on my own cheeks reflected in her eyes. She must have seen them too. She paused, her hand hovering over my wrist. "Are you sure you're okay?" I looked at the nurse. Her name tag said Chloe. "My children have a plan for me," I said, my voice raspy. "I'm not sure it's my plan." Chloe gave a small, understanding nod. She didn't pry. "My grandmother went through something like that," she said quietly, fluffing my pillow. "She found a place she loves. It was her choice." "That must be nice for her," I said, the words feeling empty. "It is," Chloe smiled. "It's called the Cypress Grove. She says the food is better than any restaurant." She finished her checks and left me alone with the quiet hum of the room. Later that afternoon, I reached for my tablet. My fingers were stiff, but I managed to type in the name, the Cypress Grove. The website loaded with bright, clear pictures. I saw sunny rooms with private balconies. I saw a sparkling blue swimming pool and women my age laughing in a water aerobics class. There were photos of a library with big, comfortable chairs and a garden overflowing with roses. It was beautiful. It looked like a resort. It also looked expensive. I opened my banking app. The numbers stared back at me, a healthy sum George and I had saved our whole lives for. A little spark of hope flickered to life inside me. I could afford this. I could absolutely afford this. The next day, Mark came to visit. He smelled of cheap aftershave and impatience. He was holding a clipboard with a stack of papers. "Hey, Mum, feeling better?" he asked, not waiting for an answer. "I brought the papers for Golden Meadows. Let's get them signed so we can check this off the list." I pushed myself up against the pillows. The movement sent a fresh jab of pain through my hip. "Mark, I'm still groggy. I'm not signing anything right now." "It's just a formality," he insisted, clicking his pen. "We already put down a deposit to hold your spot. had to use our own money, but we wanted to make sure you had a place." The lie was so smooth, it almost sounded true. I looked at the papers. Fine print swam before my eyes. "My lawyer will need to look at them first," I said. My voice was stronger than I expected. Mark's jaw tightened. "A lawyer? Mom, don't be dramatic. It's a standard agreement." He glanced at his watch. The irritation was plain on his face. He wasn't used to me saying no. That night, I couldn't sleep. The pain medication made me fuzzy, but my mind was racing. The only light in the room came from the faint green glow of the IV machine and the sliver of light under the door. I reached for my tablet again, my fingers fumbling with the power button. The screen lit up my face in the darkness. I opened my banking app. There was my savings account, and there was my checking account. Just to see if I could, I set up a small transfer, $100, from savings to checking. My finger trembled a little as I pressed the final confirmation button. A small green check mark appeared on the screen. Transfer. Successful. A secret thrill, sharp and clear, shot through me. It felt like holding a key to a hidden door. I had control. I put the tablet down and reached into my handbag on the bedside table, searching for a piece of hard candy. My fingers brushed against a stiff, forgotten business card at the bottom of my wallet. I pulled it out and held it in the dim light. Arthur Vance, attorney at law. I remembered my George patting his pocket after they'd signed our first will. "That man," George had said, "is as honest as the day is long." The next morning, after the nurse brought my breakfast tray, I waited until she left the room. The hospital phone was on the rolling table, a heavy beige thing with big buttons. I picked up the receiver. The dial tone was loud in the quiet room. I carefully punched in the numbers from Arthur's card. My heart was thumping against my ribs. A calm secretary answered, and I asked for him. After a moment, a man's voice, older but still firm, came on the line. "This is Arthur Vance." "Mr. Vance? This is Eleanor Vance," I said, my voice low. "George's wife." There was a short pause. "Eleanor. My goodness, it's been years. Is everything all right?" I took a deep breath. "No, not really. I'm in the hospital after a hip surgery and I need your help. My children are trying to take control of my finances and put me in a home against my will." I said it all in a rush. His voice didn't change. It was a solid, steady thing in the middle of my fear. "Tell me everything," he said. And as I explained, I felt a knot inside me begin to loosen. He just listened. When I was finished, he said the words that felt like a lifeline. "Eleanor, it's your money. Let's make sure it stays that way." Arthur's email arrived just after breakfast. The subject line was simple. "Your checklist." I read it on my tablet, the screen glowing in the dim morning light of my hospital room. Revoke power of attorney. Establish a new trust. Gather the last 3 bank statements. It sounded like a battle plan. Down the hall was a small room they called the family lounge. It had a desktop computer for public use. I shuffled down there in my robe and slippers, the rubber soles whispering on the polished floor. The computer hummed loudly. The keyboard felt a little sticky under my fingers. I felt like a spy in a movie, printing out the forms Arthur had attached. Each page slid out of the printer, warm to the touch. I folded them carefully and tucked them inside my robe. They didn't feel like paper. They felt like armor. I waited until my lunch tray was cleared before I called the new financial advisor. His name was Mr. Davies, and Arthur had said he was the best. We spoke on a video call using my tablet. He had a kind face and a calm voice that made complicated things sound simple. "This is an irrevocable trust, Eleanor," he explained, his voice clear through the small speaker. You will be the sole trustee and the sole beneficiary. That means you, and only you, have control. No one can touch it without your express permission. He showed me how to set it up online, step by step. It was all digital, all secure. I was just about to ask a question about transferring the funds when the door to my room swung open without a knock. "Hi, Mum. Brought you some cookies." It was Susan. I slammed my tablet shut, the magnetic cover clicking into place just as she walked toward the bed. Susan set a plastic box of store-bought cookies on my bedside table. The smell was sugary and fake. She fussed with my blanket, her hands fluttering around me like nervous birds. "We were just talking about how lovely it will be when you're all settled at Golden Meadows," she said, her voice bright and brittle. "Mark and I can bring the kids over every Sunday. It will be our new routine." I just nodded. I watched her face as she described a future that felt like a prison sentence. She didn't see me. She saw a problem that was almost solved, a box that was about to be ticked. I realized they weren't planning for my care. They were planning for my absence. "That sounds nice, dear," I said, my voice even. Inside, a thought formed, hard and clear as glass. My silence wasn't weakness. It was a strategy. The next morning, I saw Nurse Chloe in the hallway. With her was a sweet older woman in a pink vest, a hospital volunteer named Doris who delivered books and magazines. I asked if they would mind stepping into my room for a moment. "I just have a few papers that need a witness signature," I said, keeping my voice light. "Just some spring cleaning for my estate." Chloe smiled. "Of course, Eleanor." I spread the power of attorney revocation form on my rolling bed table. The paper was crisp. I took the pen Chloe offered and signed my name on the line, my hand surprisingly steady. Then Chloe signed, and Doris signed after her. The scratch of the pen was the only sound in the room. I thanked them both, and they left, thinking nothing of it. I held the signed document in my hands. It felt heavier than a piece of paper. It felt like a shield. I called a local courier service from the phone in my room. A young man in a polo shirt arrived an hour later to pick up the large manila envelope addressed to Arthur Vance. Watching him walk away with it felt final. A weight I didn't know I was carrying had been lifted. That afternoon, my phone rang. It was Mark. His voice was tight, stretched thin with annoyance. "Mum, I spoke to the woman at Golden Meadows. She said they still don't have your signed forms. What is your lawyer doing?" I took a slow breath. "He's just being thorough, Mark. Reviewing everything for Medicare compliance," he said. There was a frustrated sigh on the other end of the line, a long, angry pause. "Fine," he finally snapped, his voice sharp as a shard of glass. "But the movers are booked for next Tuesday to clear your house." The hospital air always smelled of disinfectant and lukewarm soup. I ignored it. On my tablet, the cypress grove looked like a resort. Green lawns, a sparkling blue pool, and people my age laughing on a sunny patio. I propped my pillows up higher and tapped the screen for a virtual tour. A woman named Maria, with a warm smile, walked me through a beautiful one-bedroom suite. It had a small kitchen with new appliances and a balcony big enough for a chair and a few pots of geraniums. "This one overlooks the rose garden," Maria said through the tablet's tiny speakers. "It's very peaceful." "It's lovely," I said, my voice a little hoarse. "I'll take it." There was a short, surprised pause. "Wonderful, Mrs. Vance. We can start the paperwork. We do require a deposit to hold the suite." I thought of Mark and Susan, so sure of their plan. They thought I was a burden to be managed, a line item on a budget. But I wasn't just a problem to be solved. I wasn't put on this earth to be a tax-deductible expense for my children. I said it quietly, to myself. I pulled out my credit card. Using my finger, I carefully typed the numbers into the secure form on the screen. The amount was large enough to make my heart beat a little faster. I pressed confirm. The little wheel spun for a second, and then a green check mark appeared. The suite was mine. The next morning, an email popped up on my tablet. The sender was Arthur Vance, my late husband's lawyer. My stomach did a little flip. I opened it right away. The message was short and clear. The new trust account was officially open, funded with the small amount I had transferred as a test. It was ready for the rest. "Excellent work, Eleanor," he wrote. "I suggest you wait until the morning you are scheduled for discharge to move the larger sum. Let them think they've won." I read that last part twice. The silence will be more effective than any argument. He was right. Arguing with Mark was like wrestling a stubborn mule. It just made you tired and muddy. I closed the email and looked out the window. The sky was a flat, grey colour. A quiet battle was better. It was my kind of battle. I started to sort through the few things I had with me in the hospital room. My worn blue bathrobe, a book of crosswords, the framed picture of George and me on our wedding day. It was so little. I made a list in my head of what I truly wanted from the house. My mother's jewellery box, the heavy photo albums in the hall closet, my little collection of teacups. The rest of it, the big sofa, the dining room set, the mahogany bed frame. It was just stuff, heavy stuff. My children were so focused on the furniture, on who would get what. They seemed to have forgotten I was still using it. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Brenda, Mark's wife. My fingers felt stiff as I opened it. "Measured your living room. Your sofa won't fit at GM, so we'll be taking it for our den. You're welcome." I read the text again. "You're welcome." As if she were doing me a favour. A cold, hard anger settled in my chest. It wasn't hot and messy. It was quiet and sharp, like a piece of broken glass. They were vultures, picking through my life while I was still living it. The sofa wasn't just a sofa. It was where George and I watched television for 40 years. It was where I read stories to my grandchildren when they were small. I picked up the hospital phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. It rang twice. "Gable Residence," a familiar voice answered. "Martha, it's Eleanor." "Eleanor, dear, how are you feeling?" she asked, her voice full of genuine warmth. "I'm recovering, Martha, but I need a favour, a very important one." I told her about the small cedar box on the top shelf of my closet, the one with my wedding ring and George's watch and a few old letters. "Can you go in and get it for me, and just hold it? I don't want the movers to touch it." "Say no more," she said immediately. "I'll go over this afternoon. It will be safe with me, Eleanor. You just focus on getting well." That night, the hospital was quiet. The only sounds were the soft hum of a machine in the hall and the distant sigh of traffic. The city lights cast a pale glow on the ceiling. I couldn't sleep. I picked up my tablet, the screen bright in the darkness. I opened my banking app. The numbers stared back at me. It was a lifetime of careful saving, of going without, of George's hard work and my own. It was security. It was dignity. My children saw it as their inheritance. They were just waiting. I took a deep breath. My finger hovered over the screen. With a steady hand, I selected the new trust account. I typed in the full amount from my savings, right down to the last cent. Then I pressed the button that said, "Confirm Transfer." A small box popped up on the screen. It had 2 words inside. "Transfer Successful." A feeling of calm washed over me, so deep and so complete it felt like I could finally breathe again. That last night in the hospital, the air was still and smelled faintly of bleach. The only light came from my tablet screen, casting a blue glow on the starched white sheets. I drafted a very short email. It was addressed to my son, Mark, and my daughter, Susan. I typed each word slowly, deliberately, like I was placing stones in a wall. I read the final line aloud in a whisper, the one my lawyer Arthur helped me write. My health is a subscription you are no longer authorized to manage. It felt right. It felt true. I looked at the clock on the screen. It was just after midnight. I set the email to send automatically at 9 o'clock in the morning. Then I turned off the tablet, pulled the thin blanket up to my chin, and fell into the first deep, peaceful sleep I'd had in weeks. The next morning felt different. The sunlight slanting through the window seemed brighter. Mark and Susan were due at 11, ready to haul me off to Golden Meadows. I was dressed and waiting by 8:30, my small overnight bag packed at my feet. The hospital discharge papers felt crisp and important in my hands. At 8:45, a young man in a smart black suit appeared at my door. "Ms. Vance?" he asked, his voice quiet and respectful. "Your car is ready." My favourite nurse, Chloe, wheeled me down the hall. We didn't go to the main entrance with all the bustle and noise. She took me to a quiet side exit. As she helped me settle into the plush leather seat of a shiny black car, she gave my hand a squeeze. "You take care of yourself, you hear?" she said, giving me a quick thumbs up. As the car pulled smoothly away from the curb, I glanced back. I saw Mark's big silver SUV turning into the main hospital parking lot, right on schedule. My arrival at the Cypress Grove was nothing like I had imagined. The lobby smelled of lemon polish and fresh flowers. A kind woman named Maria greeted me by name and handed me a key card. "Welcome home, Eleanor," she said with a warm smile. "We are so glad to have you." My suite was filled with light. A sliding glass door led to a small balcony overlooking a garden bursting with roses. On a little table there was a basket with fresh fruit, some cheese, and a small bottle of sparkling cider. I sat down in a cushioned chair on the balcony and lifted my face to the sun. For the first time since my surgery, I felt the tension leave my shoulders. Just then, my phone, sitting on the table beside me, began to buzz. It didn't ring. It just vibrated angrily, skittering across the glass. I reached over and pressed the silence button. After a few minutes of quiet, I picked up the phone. The screen was lit up with notifications. So many little red circles. I saw a string of text messages from Mark. The first one read, "Mum, where are you? The nurse at the desk said you were discharged." The next one, sent just 2 minutes later, was more frantic. "Susan is on her way. Did someone from Golden Meadows pick you up early? This wasn't the plan." Then a third, all in capital letters. "Answer your phone right now." My 9 o'clock email had landed. The phone began to ring. It was Susan. I let the screen glow with her picture for a moment. Then I took a breath and answered, putting it on speaker. I didn't say a word. Her voice was a high, panicked wail. "Mum! Oh, thank God. We were so worried. Mark checked the bank accounts. They're empty. Mum, someone scammed you. You've been robbed." I looked out at the red and yellow roses in the garden below. I picked up a grape from the welcome basket. "Nobody scammed me, Susan," I said, my voice as calm as a flat lake. "I moved my money." I ended the call before she could reply. I didn't want to hear the sputtering or the questions. A moment later, a new text message popped up on the screen. It was from Mark. "My lawyer just got a letter about the power of attorney. What have you done?" This is illegal. I smiled at the little screen in my hand. Mark's text said, "This is illegal." I knew it was 100% legal. My lawyer, Arthur, had made sure of that. I put the phone on my bedside table, face down. The buzzing stopped. Later that morning, I put on my new swimsuit. It was a modest one, with a little skirt, in a nice shade of blue. The water in the heated pool at the Cypress Grove felt like a warm hug. It took all the weight off my new hip. The instructor was a young woman with a kind voice, and she showed us gentle movements. Next to me in the water was a woman with short, silver hair and bright, intelligent eyes. "First time?" she asked, swishing her arms through the water. "It is," I said. "I'm Eleanor." "Margaret," she said with a grin. "Welcome to the club. We call ourselves the Mermaids." I laughed, a real, genuine laugh. It felt good. The next afternoon, the front desk manager, a lovely woman named Maria, called my suite. "Mrs. Vance," she said, her voice calm and professional. "I just wanted to let you know, 2 individuals identifying as your children were here in the lobby." I felt a cold knot in my stomach. "Were here?" "Yes, past tense," she said. "They were demanding to see you. I explained that you are not accepting unscheduled visitors. They became rather loud." I could picture it perfectly. Mark, red in the face. Susan, starting to cry. "Security escorted them out," Maria finished. "You are not to worry." "Thank you, Maria," I said, my voice steady. After I hung up, I sat in my armchair and looked out at the rose garden. The sun was warm on the windows. I imagined the ugly scene they must have made in that beautiful, quiet lobby. I waited to feel embarrassed, or sad, or angry. But I felt nothing at all. It was like hearing a story about strangers. A few days later, an email with a very official-looking subject line arrived. It was from Mark's lawyer. I read the words on my tablet screen. Gross negligence, financial abuse, petition for competency hearing. It was a long letter full of threats designed to scare an old woman into submission. My hand trembled just a little. For a moment, the old fear came back. I took a deep breath, the scent of the fresh lilies on my table calming me down. I forwarded the email to Arthur. His reply came in less than 10 minutes. "Eleanor, these are empty threats. We have the hospital's competency reports from before and after your surgery. Let them waste their money. Do not reply." I deleted the lawyer's email. I felt the tension leave my shoulders. Just as I was putting my tablet away, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Susan. "Mom, please, just think about what Dad would have wanted. He would be so heartbroken to see you like this." I picked up the old silver picture frame from my nightstand. It was a photo of me and George on our 40th anniversary, his arm around me, both of us smiling so wide our eyes crinkled. I knew exactly what George would have wanted. He would have clapped his hands and said, "Good for you, Ellie. Don't let them walk all over you." He always believed in standing up for yourself. I went into my phone's contacts. I found Mark's name and his wife Brenda's name. I pressed the button that said, "Block contact." The finality of it felt good, like locking a door against a cold wind. I left Susan's number unblocked for now. That evening, I went down to the library for my first meeting with the Cypress Grove Book Club. The book was one I'd been meaning to read for years. A week later, a thick, cream-coloured envelope arrived. The handwriting was Susan's. I opened it carefully with my silver letter opener. It was a long letter, 4 pages, full of apologies that didn't sound real and memories that felt twisted to serve her purpose. Then, on the 3rd page, she got to the point. Mark had taken out a big business loan. and he'd been counting on my money as a guarantee. His partners were threatening to sue. They were in trouble. They needed my help. I read the letter one time from beginning to end. I saw every honey-coated word for the trap it was. I folded the pages neatly and put them back in the envelope. Then I walked down the hall to the resident's office. "Good morning, Eleanor," the receptionist said. "Good morning," I replied. "May I use your shredder for a moment?" I pushed the envelope into the slot. The machine whirred to life, a loud, grinding sound that was deeply, deeply satisfying. My old church pastor called on a Tuesday morning. The air conditioning in my suite hummed softly, and I could smell the roses blooming on my balcony. His voice was kind, but I could hear the worry underneath it. "Eleanor, I'm so sorry to bother you," he started. "But Mark and Susan have been, well, they've been telling people a rather concerning story." I waited, my hand steady on the receiver. "And what story is that, Pastor John?" He cleared his throat. "That you've been taken advantage of, manipulated by some predator who has stolen your money." I looked out at the bright blue sky. I felt no anger, only a deep, settled calm. "Pastor," I said, my voice as clear as a bell, "no one stole my money. I simply decided to spend it on myself. My children confused my savings account with their inheritance fund. I corrected their error." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear the faint sound of church bells from his office window. Finally he spoke, and all the worry was gone from his voice. "Eleanor," he said warmly, "you sound more in control than ever. God bless you." The next week, I was having lunch with my new friend Margaret in the Cypress Grove dining room. The sun streamed through the big windows, and our iced tea glasses clinked as we talked about a book we'd both read. She was telling a funny story about her late husband when my tablet, sitting on the table, lit up with a news alert. "Oh, let me see," Margaret said, peering over. "Is it more political nonsense?" I tapped the screen. The headline was from the local business journal. It read, "Mark Vance sued by partners for financial mismanagement." There was a picture of my son, looking tired and angry, walking out of a courthouse. I read the first sentence. Something about a business loan and misused funds. Margaret looked at me, her smile gone. "Ellie, is that—" I took a slow sip of my iced tea and squeezed the lemon wedge into it. The tartness was sharp and clean. I slid the tablet screen off and pushed it aside. "Yes, it is," I said. "Now, what were you saying about your husband and that fishing trip?" That chapter of my life was over. 6 months passed. The ache in my hip was a distant memory. I walked with a cane sometimes, a handsome cherrywood one, but mostly because it made me feel elegant, like an actress from an old movie. My days were full. I took a watercolor class on Mondays, and on Wednesdays I worked in the community garden, feeling the rich, dark soil under my fingernails. My life was finally quiet, peaceful, and entirely my own. "Your petunias are looking a little thirsty, Ellie." Another resident, a retired botanist named Frank, called over to me one afternoon. "They're not thirsty, Frank," I called back, wiping my brow. "They're dramatic. There's a difference." He laughed, and the sound carried on the warm breeze. It felt good to be surrounded by simple kindness. For my 76th birthday, a card arrived. The envelope was addressed in Susan's familiar, looping handwriting. I almost threw it away, but my curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a school photograph of my oldest grandchild, Michael. He had my late George's eyes. Tucked behind the photo was a small note. It had only 3 words. "I miss you." I looked at my grandson's smiling face for a long time. I bought a small, simple silver frame and put the photograph on my nightstand. I did not reply to the note. I was done with words. If she missed me, she knew where I was. I was waiting for actions now. A week later, another envelope arrived. This one was thick and creamy, the kind people use for important events. It was an invitation, engraved in elegant script. Michael was graduating from college. The party was to be held at my son Mark's house. Margaret was with me when I opened it. "Well," she said, peering at the card, "are you going to go into the lion's den?" I ran my thumb over the raised lettering. I thought about the rumors, the threats, the coldness. But then I thought about Michael's smile in the photograph. "Oh, I'm going," I said, a small, rebellious idea taking root. I looked at Margaret. "But I'm not going as their frail old mother. I'm going as Eleanor Vance." My arrival turned heads. I knew it would. The private car, a quiet and respectable black sedan, pulled up right at the edge of the lawn. I had chosen my dress with care, a simple sheath of pale blue silk that brought out the silver in my hair. It wasn't loud, but it spoke of quality. It spoke of money well spent. I saw them immediately. Mark and his wife Brenda stood near the gift table looking strained. Their smiles were tight. For a moment, Mark's eyes met mine, and his face went slack with shock. I offered him a tiny, polite nod, the kind you give a stranger in a grocery aisle, and then I moved past them as if they were simply part of the scenery. My granddaughter, Sarah, ran to me, her graduation gown flying behind her. "Grandma, you came." I held her close, breathing in the scent of her youthful perfume. "Of course, my dear," I said, handing her a thick cardstock envelope. "I wouldn't miss this for the world." I felt Mark's stare on my back, hot and heavy, but I didn't turn around. He found me later, by the big glass bowl of pink lemonade. He tried to look casual, but his knuckles were white where he gripped his plastic cup. "Mum," he said, his voice low and urgent, "we need to talk. I'm in real trouble." I took a slow sip of my lemonade. The ice cubes clinked against the glass. It was the only sound between us for a long moment. I looked him right in the eye. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "That sounds like a personal problem, Mark," I said. And then I turned and walked away. I left him standing there, his mouth slightly open, the pink lemonade forgotten in his hand. From across the lawn, I saw Brenda shoot me a look of pure, undiluted hatred. I spent the next hour making my way through the crowd. It was like watching a story correct itself in real time. "Eleanor, my goodness!" Carol Perkins from my old book club exclaimed, touching my arm. "We heard you were unwell." I smiled at her, a genuine, warm smile. "As you can see, Carol, the rumors of my demise were greatly exaggerated." I chatted with my old neighbor, Mrs. Gable, who gave my hand a secret, supportive squeeze. One by one, I saw the confused and worried looks on my old friends' faces soften into relief, then into respect. The picture my children had painted of a confused, frail old woman was being erased by the simple fact of me standing there, healthy and calm and dressed in silk. I didn't stay long. I said my goodbyes to Sarah, gave her one last hug, and slipped away before the cake was even cut. The ride back to Cypress Grove was quiet and peaceful. Back in my suite, the silence was a comfort. The air smelled faintly of the lavender I kept in a pot on my balcony. I took off my shoes, sighing as my feet touched the cool floor. I felt a deep, settled quiet inside me. The anger I had carried for so long was gone. It hadn't been defeated. It had simply burned itself out, leaving behind not ash, but clean, clear peace. Just as I was about to make a cup of tea, my phone rang. I saw the name and smiled. Eleanor? Arthur Vance here. I hope I'm not disturbing you. Not at all, Arthur. It's good to hear your voice, I said, settling into my favourite armchair. Well, I'm calling with a bit of news. I'm finally hanging up my hat, he said, retiring for good. Oh, Arthur, congratulations. You've certainly earned it. Thank you, he said, and I can hear the smile in his voice. It means I'll have a bit more time on my hands. I was wondering if you might let an old lawyer buy you lunch sometime next week. The question hung in the air, feeling like so much more than just lunch. The restaurant Arthur chose was a quiet Italian place with white tablecloths and heavy silver forks. The light from the window was soft. For the first hour, we didn't speak of my children or of legal matters at all. We talked about books and gardening and the terrible state of modern television. It was easy, comfortable. You know, he said, swirling the wine in his glass. My wife, Helen, loved travel documentaries. We saw the whole world right from our sofa. George and I always meant to see Italy, I confessed. We just never seemed to find the right time. We talked about them, Helen and George, with a gentle fondness that had no sharp edges. It was just two people remembering. As the waiter cleared our plates, Arthur cleared his throat. There's a Mahler performance at the Symphony next month, he said, looking at me directly. Helen was never a fan, but I always loved it. Would you consider joining me? I found myself saying yes, without a moment's hesitation, and a feeling I hadn't felt in years, a little flutter of pleasant anticipation, warmed my chest. Eleanor began a new social life, attending concerts and gallery openings with Arthur and their circle of friends. We went to the symphony one crisp autumn evening. I wore a wool coat I hadn't touched in years and the pearl earrings George had given me for our 40th anniversary. The concert hall was grand, all red velvet and gold trim. The air smelled faintly of perfume and old wood. Arthur helped me with my coat. He was a perfect gentleman. It's nice to be out, isn't it? He said, his voice a low rumble. It's wonderful, I told him, and I meant it. The lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the crowd. The orchestra began to play, and the music filled every part of me. I closed my eyes and just listened. This was a world away from a stuffy room at Golden Meadows, with the sound of a game show blaring from a television down the hall. For a moment, I thought of Mark and Susan, and felt a strange, distant sadness for the beautiful things they would never get to share with me again. A few days later, my friend Margaret and I went to a local garden centre. I wanted some pansies for the pots on my balcony. The air in the greenhouse was warm and damp, smelling of rich soil and green growing things. We were in the checkout line when I heard a familiar voice. Eleanor? Eleanor Vance, is that you? It was Carol, from my old church circle. She stared at me, her eyes wide with a sort of pitying concern. Oh dear, she said, clutching her purse. We've all been so worried about you. I smiled politely. I placed my tray of purple and yellow pansies on the counter. There's no need to worry, Carol. I'm doing wonderfully. But your children said... She started, then stopped, looking flustered. I know what they said, I replied, my voice calm and even. I paid the cashier, picked up my flowers, and gave Carol a small nod. It was nice to see you. As Margaret and I walked to the car, I could feel Carol's confused stare on my back. It didn't bother me, but it was a reminder that my old life was still out there, like a story being told about someone else. That weekend, Arthur took me to dinner at a quiet Italian restaurant. It was the kind of place with checkered tablecloths, and candles stuck in old wine bottles. The low murmur of other diners was a comfortable backdrop. We shared a bottle of red wine, and the taste was smooth and warm. He told me about his late wife, Clara. He spoke of her love for gardening and the terrible jokes she used to tell. It wasn't sad. It was just a man sharing a part of his heart. I found myself telling him about George, about the way he used to hum when he was fixing things around the house. "It's nice to share memories with someone who understands," Arthur said, looking at me over the rim of his glass. His eyes were kind. Later, as we were finishing our coffee, he mentioned he was thinking of taking a trip. "I've always wanted to see the glaciers," he said casually. "Have you ever wanted to see Alaska, Eleanor?" The question hung in the air between us, full of possibilities I hadn't considered in a very long time. A few days later, a package arrived for me at the front desk. The return address was Susan's. I carried the small, heavy box back to my suite and opened it on my coffee table. Inside was a leather photo album I recognized from the bookshelf in my old living room. A small, folded note was tucked inside the cover. I opened the album first. There they were. Mark as a toddler with chocolate on his face. Susan in a frilly Easter dress. Family vacations at the beach. I touched a picture of George holding both of them, his smile so wide and proud. The photos smelled of old paper and memories. Then I unfolded the note. The handwriting was shaky. "I was cleaning out the attic," it read. "I thought you should have these. I'm sorry, Mom." I sat on my balcony for a long time, the album open on my lap. The sun was warm on my hands. For the first time in months, I felt something other than anger toward my daughter. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. It was just a complicated ache in my chest that I didn't know what to do with. The next morning, I went to the library at Cypress Grove. I found the travel section and pulled out a few brochures for Alaskan cruises. The pictures were stunning. Immense blue glaciers, whales breaching in the cold sea, eagles soaring over dark green forests. The glossy paper felt cool under my fingertips. My friend Margaret found me there, a mystery novel tucked under her arm. "Planning an escape?" she asked with a twinkle in her eye. "Just looking," I said, smiling. She sat down across from me and looked at the brochure in my hands. "You know," she said softly, "the world is still out there, Eleanor. Don't let the past keep you docked in the harbour." Her words settled in my mind. She was right. I thought of Arthur's kind eyes, of Susan's note, of the life I was building for myself, one quiet day at a time. I closed the brochure, walked back to my suite, and picked up my phone. I dialed Arthur's number. When he answered, my voice was steady. "Arthur," I said, "about that trip to Alaska. Tell me more." A few weeks later, Arthur called me while I was arranging flowers on my little dining table. The yellow tulips felt like sunshine in a vase. His voice was warm and had a little smile in it. "Eleanor," he said, "I have a serious question for you." I held a tulip, its stem cool and smooth in my hand. "Oh dear. Should I sit down?" "Probably a good idea." He chuckled. "How do you feel about autumn in Vermont? I've found a 2-week foliage tour. Little country inns, apple cider, a train ride through the mountains. The whole 9 yards." For a moment, the old fear flickered inside me. The one that whispered about saving for a rainy day, about being sensible. Then I looked around my beautiful, sunlit apartment. I looked at the life I had built for myself. It was already raining, and I had bought myself the best umbrella on the market. "Arthur," I said, my voice steady and clear, "I feel very, very good about autumn in Vermont." He laughed, a happy, relieved sound. "Wonderful. I'll book it. But you know, We should probably get our medical directives and travel insurance sorted out before we go, just to be practical. I smiled. The idea of signing a document that gave him, a kind and respectful man, the power to make decisions for me felt completely different. It felt like a partnership, not a prison sentence. A letter arrived the next day on thick, cream-colored paper. It was from Chloe, the young nurse from the hospital. She wrote that she had been accepted into a top nursing program to become a nurse practitioner, but she was worried about the tuition. She wasn't asking for anything, just sharing her news with someone who had been kind to her. I picked up the phone right away. "Chloe, it's Eleanor Vance." "Mrs. Vance, it's so good to hear your voice," she said, sounding surprised. "I got your letter," I said, "and I have a proposal. I would like to pay for your tuition." There was a stunned silence on the other end. "Oh no, I couldn't possibly—" "You can," I said gently. "My late husband and I always believed in investing in good people. Consider it an investment in kindness, Chloe. Lord knows the world needs more of it." She was crying softly now. "I don't know how to thank you, Mrs. Vance." A memory of the cold, dismissive faces in my living room flashed in my mind. "Just promise me one thing," I said, my voice firm. "Promise me you'll always listen to your patients. Really listen to what they're trying to tell you, even when they don't have the words." That evening, I was sorting through the small box of photos my neighbor had saved for me. The faint, papery smell of the past rose up as I lifted the lid. I found a picture of George and me on our 25th anniversary, his arm wrapped around me, both of us laughing into the camera. I ran my thumb over his smiling face. "Well, George," I whispered to the quiet room, "you would not believe the last year." I told him all about Mark and Susan, about the bank accounts, about Cypress Grove. I told him about Arthur. "You'd like him," I said, my throat feeling a little tight. "He opens the car door for me, just like you always did." My friend Margaret knocked softly and came in, holding 2 mugs of herbal tea. The steam smelled of chamomile and mint. "Thinking about old times?" she asked, setting a mug on the table beside me. I picked up the warm mug, its heat seeping into my hands. "No," I said, looking from George's picture to her kind face. "I'm thinking about new ones." Then, at the bottom of the box, I saw it. A small, faded photograph of Mark and Susan, maybe 5 and 7 years old, holding hands in our old backyard, squinting into the sun. For a second, a tiny ache echoed in my heart for those 2 children, for the mother I used to be. It was there, and then it was gone. The trip to Vermont was everything Arthur had promised. We stood on the porch of a little inn, wrapped in warm sweaters, watching the sun set behind hills that were on fire with red and gold leaves. The air was crisp and smelled of wood smoke and damp earth. "We should see the cherry blossoms in Washington next spring," Arthur said, his voice soft in the twilight. He wasn't looking at me, but at the horizon. "I'd like that very much," I replied. My life had become a series of things to look forward to, not things to dread. He reached over and took my hand. His hand was large and warm, and it held mine with a gentle firmness that felt like safety. It felt like respect. I thought of my son, Mark, trying to force a pen into my hand to sign away my home, my money, my life. This simple, quiet touch from Arthur held more strength and truth than any of my family's loud pronouncements of love. It was a promise, without a single word needed. We had been back for a week when the phone rang one afternoon. I saw Susan's name on the screen and hesitated before answering. Her calls had been infrequent, filled with awkward small talk about her children and the weather. But this time, her voice was different. It was flat, stripped of all its usual drama. "Mom," she said, "it's about Mark." I sat down in my armchair, the soft chenille cool against my arms. "Is he all right?" "He's lost the business," she said. There was a long pause. I could hear her take a shaky breath. "He lost everything. The house, the cars. Brenda left him." She wasn't asking for money. She was just reporting the news, like a war correspondent from a battlefield I had long since abandoned. "I'm sorry to hear that, Susan," I said. And I was. Not for Mark, but for the little boy in the photograph who had lost his way so badly. "We were so wrong, Mom," she whispered, and then the tears came. "I was so wrong. I let him bully me, and I let him bully you. I'm so sorry." I listened to her cry, looking out my window at the bright pink roses climbing the trellis on my balcony. They were thriving. "Thank you for saying that, Susan," I said quietly. There was another long silence, filled only with her sniffling. Can I visit you sometime?" she finally asked, her voice small. "Just me. I'd like to see you." I thought about the years of neglect, the casual cruelty, the final, unforgivable betrayal, but I also heard the genuine brokenness in my daughter's voice. I held the phone, the future a blank page, and took a slow, deep breath. My daughter Susan called on a Tuesday morning. I was in the Cypress Grove greenhouse, repotting an orchid. The air smelled of damp earth and fertilizer. "Mum?" Her voice was quiet, not like the screeching I remembered. Mark lost his house." I pushed a little soil around the base of the plant. "I'm sorry to hear that, Susan." And I was, in a distant way, like hearing a sad story about a stranger. "He and Brenda are moving into a small apartment," she continued, her voice thin. "He keeps asking if I've spoken to you, if you're going to help." I picked up my little watering can. "And what did you tell him?" There was a long pause. I could hear her take a shaky breath. "I told him that your health is a subscription he is no longer authorized to manage, and neither is your money." I stopped watering. She had used my exact words, the words from my email. It wasn't an apology, not really. But it was something. It was respect. "That must have been a difficult conversation," I said, my voice even. "It was," she whispered. "Mum, were you ever scared? When you did all that?" The question hung in the warm, humid air of the greenhouse, heavy as a summer storm. Of course I was scared. The night I transferred all my money, my hand shook so badly I could barely hold my tablet. Lying in that hospital bed, I felt like a little girl lost in the woods. The fear was a cold, heavy thing in my stomach. But I thought of my late husband, George. He always said, "Ellie, fear is a bully. You just have to look it right in the eye." I saw that same fear in a new resident here, a woman named Carol. Her children would visit, their voices loud and cheerful in the hallway, talking about what was best for Mom. They would leave, and Carol would sit by her window, looking small and lost. One afternoon, I saw her in the library, just staring at a book without turning the pages. I walked over and sat down beside her. The room was quiet, except for the gentle hum of the air conditioner. "The first few weeks are the strangest, aren't they?" I said softly. She jumped a little. "Oh, yes, they are. My name is Eleanor." "I'm Carol," she said. Her hands were fidgeting with the cover of the book. "My kids, they mean well. They just have a plan for me." I knew that plan. I knew it by heart. I just nodded and said, "Sometimes the best plan is the one you make for yourself." Carol looked at me then, really looked at me, and a tiny spark of something other than fear flickered in her eyes. I told my friend Margaret about Carol over our weekly game of gin rummy. The cards made a soft, snapping sound as she shuffled them. They mean well, Margaret snorted, dealing the cards with expert hands. That's the excuse every steamroller uses before they flatten you. I remembered Mark's voice in my living room, so sure of himself. It's for your own good. I looked at my hand of cards. I've learned that for your own good is often just another way of saying for my own convenience. Amen to that, Margaret said, laying down a card. So, what are we going to do about our friend Carol? We didn't do much. We just started saving her a seat at our table for lunch. We invited her to our water aerobics class. We didn't give her advice. We just gave her a place to belong, a place where no one had a plan for her. That evening, Arthur called. His voice was warm and cheerful over the phone. Eleanor, I have some news. The sale on my house is final. The last box is officially moved. Oh, Arthur, that's wonderful, I said, settling into my favourite armchair. The evening sun was streaming through my window. It is, he said. It feels like a real turning point. I'd like to celebrate. Would you have dinner with me on Friday? At the Pelican Grill? My heart gave a little flutter, a feeling I thought was long gone. It was a simple invitation, but it felt like so much more. The Pelican Grill was a lovely place by the water. The low light from the candles made everything soft and warm. We could hear the gentle clink of silverware and the murmur of other people's conversations. Arthur raised his wineglass. To new beginnings, he said, his eyes smiling. To new beginnings, I echoed, touching my glass to his. We didn't talk about our children or our past sorrows. We talked about the future. He wanted to take a train trip through the mountains in the fall. I told him I'd always wanted to see the turning leaves in Vermont. Well then, he said, as if it were the simplest thing in the world, we should go. It wasn't a grand proposal. It was just a plan. A small, happy plan made between two people who respected each other. Looking at his kind face in the candlelight, I felt a deep, simple peace. The old anger and hurt were gone. They had been replaced by this quiet warmth. As we were leaving, my phone buzzed in my purse. I pulled it out later, in the car. It was a text from Susan. Just a picture of my granddaughter, Lily, holding up a colourful drawing of a lopsided house and a smiling sun. The caption underneath read, "She asked about you today." I looked at the drawing for a long time that night, sitting on my balcony. The air was cool and smelled of night-blooming jasmine from the garden below. I smiled at the crooked little house in the picture. A relationship with Susan might be possible one day, slowly, on my terms. But my happiness didn't depend on it anymore. My life was full, right here, right now. I stood up and went to my little collection of potted plants. I had a geranium that was about to bloom. I picked up my small watering can and gave it a drink. The water darkened the rich soil. It was quiet, and I was alone. But I was not lonely. It felt like planting a garden after a long, hard winter. It felt like home.